Ambassador John Bolton, thank you so much for joining us again on CNN News 18. Now, Secret Service in the United States is currently facing serious questions about security footprint as far as Trump's rally in Pennsylvania was concerned. And these are concerns which are being raised amid reports of an alleged Iranian threat. Not to forget that a Wall Street Journal report is also detailing that former NSA Robert O'Brien wanted his government protection extended amid credible threats from Iran, but was denied permit by the Biden administration. Another crucial point is that one of the sessions at the RNC is also talking about making America secure again. Has the assassination attempt against Donald Trump validated the belief that Biden administration is incompetent in terms of national security?
Well, I'm currently with Secret Service protection because of the Iranian threat beginning in December of 2021 by President Biden's order. And so I think we have known for some time that following Qasem Soleimani's early exit, courtesy of the Central Command, that the Ayatollahs in Tehran have wanted retribution against the United States, and from that point, President Trump was at the top of their list. Others of us were also on the list. So what's unusual, or what's surprising to me at least here, is that Iran may have decided to take some action against Trump after those many years have passed. Now, maybe there were other things I didn't know about. That's entirely possible. But especially that they would try to take action right in the middle of a presidential election campaign. Not the smartest thing they've ever done, although there's a long list of not smart things they've done. So I think that the threat posed by Iran is real. It's certainly, if you look at what the attempted killing of Masih Alinejad, the attack on Salman Rushdie,
Right.
attacks that we know that the regime in Tehran has taken against the Iranian diaspora in Europe, and frankly, their support for terrorists in the Middle East. That's how they operate, and I do think it's a very, very serious threat. Now, what happened in Pennsylvania, we don't know all the answers. It was obviously a very close thing for Donald Trump. Tragically, one of the attendees at the rally did die. Two others remained critically injured. Biden has ordered an independent investigation of all the circumstances. I think that's the right thing to do. I think it's important that certainly it be comprehensive. I think it's also important it be done quickly because there are already conspiracy theories sprouting up about what happened or didn't happen in Pennsylvania. It's very important in a tense election period to try and get the facts out without fear or favor, and hopefully calm some of those conspiracy theories down. But on your big ultimate question, yes, I think the Biden administration has been very weak in the national security space, particularly with respect to Iran, but with respect to Russia's unprovoked aggression in Ukraine, to the threat
Right.
along China's Indo-Pacific perimeter, to everybody on that perimeter, starting with Taiwan, certainly extending right to India. So it's a very dangerous world, and I think that from the U.S. perspective, we need a much stronger approach. Otherwise, our adversaries will take advantage of what they perceive to be weakness. I think that's an ever-present danger.
Absolutely, it is. And Ambassador, many are saying that the assassination bid against Trump is a historic opportunity for the Republican Party to choose democracy, even more so after the Republican Party had previously refused to recognize the political implications of firearm use in the public space until Donald Trump himself became a victim. Do you not think that it now faces the need to reconsider its staunch opposition to gun regulation?
Well, I think it would be unlikely that the party would change because so many of its adherents are strong proponents of the Second Amendment. We haven't heard Trump speak to that yet. His address to the Republican National Convention can well tell us something about that. But I think the real question is what the independent investigation shows led to the failure to stop that shooter. I mean, that's the best way to prevent it from happening is better preparation. There was obviously something went wrong somewhere, or that shooting never would have taken place.
All right, now let's talk about what foreign policy under a possible Trump administration could look like. We have seen Trump reshape American policy towards Beijing during his 4 years in office, launching a tech and trade war and casting China as a rival whose success comes at the U.S. expense. Could a Trump-Vance win now reshape America's relationship with China, not to forget Taiwan, considering we've seen Taiwan also dominate the political rhetoric when Donald Trump has also highlighted how the United States should not be bearing the cost of Taiwan's war or fight with China.
Right. Well, this is part of the irony of Trump picking Vance is they really don't agree on Taiwan. Vance's theory about reducing American aid to Ukraine and being less involved in Europe turns on his view that the United States doesn't have the capacity to be as active in NATO as it has been, given the Chinese threat in the Indo-Pacific. And that certainly the main point of concern at the moment is Taiwan, historically, because the Chinese Communist Party says that it wants it back. There's a long debate about what Taiwan's status actually is. I do consider it an independent country, and I think we should recognize it as such. Trump obviously doesn't care about Taiwan at all. And I tell the story in my book very frequently in the Oval Office. He'd be sitting behind the Resolute desk and he'd pick up one of his Sharpie pens and he'd point to the tip and he'd say, "See that? That's Taiwan." Then he'd point to the desk and he'd say, "See that? That's China." Trump right now is taking a very negative attitude on China, threatening tariffs, as you said. I think that's because he believes that the COVID virus, which originated in China, cost him the 2020 election. It certainly sent the American economy and the world economy into a nosedive. And he thinks, probably correctly, that if the economy had not gone down, he would have been reelected. So he's talking tough now. Will he do that once he's elected this time? Not necessarily.
It's very interesting, Ambassador, that you mentioned EU and the overall policy towards Europe. Now, Vance has already rattled allies in Europe by strongly criticizing U.S. support for Ukraine against its war with Russia. Like Donald Trump, he has also repeatedly criticized NATO and its European members for not spending enough on defense. What will the Trump-Vance partnership now mean for the war in Ukraine and Europe?
Well, I think Ukraine's in serious trouble if they're elected. I think the inclination to try and solve the war leans very much in the Russian direction. I think Trump's relationship with Putin, which he thinks is very good, would push him that way. I'm very worried about what Trump will do with NATO. I was with him at the NATO summit in Brussels in 2018 when he came within an inch of withdrawing from NATO at that point. And I think that possibility remains. I think withdrawing from NATO would be a catastrophic mistake, and I think it would have implications all over the world. I think in Asia, even now, people are worried about what the U.S. reliability would be in a Trump administration. So I think this is a potentially very dangerous time, and I think that this is one of the reasons the Democrats are vulnerable with a nominee like Biden, who projects weakness. I mean, I don't wish anybody ill health, and everybody gets older, so everybody faces this. It may well be they replace Biden as their nominee. I think the pressure in that direction is growing. Frankly, I thought that was over, but I think it's back on track and growing. So we may end up with an election between Donald Trump and somebody else. But these issues of international affairs need to be a much bigger part of the American election campaign. This is something the voters ought to hear from their candidates more about.
All right, let's also talk about the New Delhi-Washington bilateral relationship. The level of engagement between the two countries, India and the United States, has suffered a massive setback, be it announcing an indictment accusing an Indian intelligence official of masterminding the plot to kill Khalistani separatist Gurpatwant Singh Pannu, or even intervening in India's internal matters such as the farmers' protests or even the legal action against opposition politicians, the issue of CAA. Their interventions have become a valid concern for New Delhi. Now, contrast that with relations under the Trump administration. Do you see bilateral relationship between New Delhi and Washington getting reshaped in case Donald Trump comes for a second time?
Well, I think one of the other factors that has caused difficulty is that the relationship between India and Russia during the Ukraine war. Now, there's obviously a long history with respect to Russia. I think it's more precarious for India now to have that closer relationship with Russia because of the growing China-Russia axis. Like the Sino-Soviet alliance of the Cold War, this time with China very much in the driver's seat, Russia very much a junior partner. So I think there's a lot of sorting out that India needs to do, and it could be that in a Trump administration that Delhi-Washington relations would improve. I think my impression was that the Modi-Trump relationship was a very strong one personally, and so that's something to build on. But I also think that India and the U.S. have to come to a closer understanding of how to deal with China. I think the Asian Quad that was put together and really reinvigorated by sadly now deceased Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, Japan, India, Australia, the U.S. It's a good vehicle to have conversations about that. And so I hope whether Trump or Biden are elected, I hope the Quad continues in its work.
It's interesting that you mentioned the Quad as well. Now, here in India, there's a lot of support for Donald Trump. We've seen the Hindu Sena offer puja for the long life of Donald Trump. Equally interesting is the Indian origin of J.D. Vance's wife, Usha Chilukuri. Will Donald Trump's India connection now be able to cement the relationship between New Delhi and Washington?
Well, I think it certainly would be an amazing signal, and it's evidence of how American democracy works. As we have populations of people who have come to this country, maintained for very good reasons close ties to their country of origin or their ancestors' countries of origin. I think it strengthens America, and I think strengthening the India-U.S. relationship should be a high priority, whether it's a Trump administration or a Biden administration.
True. Ambassador, my last question. After persistent questions about his ability to serve from within his party, even outside, President Joe Biden has said that he's willing to relinquish power to Vice President Kamala Harris if he wins a second term but is unable to complete it for health reasons. He has, of course, discounted the likelihood of that scenario, but with that growing chorus and a possibility of him stepping down now becoming a high probability, what's your assessment?
Well, I don't think Biden is going to get a second term, so I don't think a transfer in a second term is really an issue. I think the question in these days, as we speak, is whether the Democratic Party will see the danger that it's in. And they probably don't want to take advice from Republicans like me, but if they see the political danger that they're in, and get a new presidential nominee, maybe Kamala Harris, maybe somebody else, but their choices between certain defeat with Joe Biden and likely defeat with somebody else, I think I'd be surprised if they don't come to the second choice, but they certainly haven't so far.
Well, Ambassador, President Biden's not listening to Democrats. I think Republicans will only have to step aside. But many thanks to you, Ambassador Bolton, for joining in on CNN News 18. It's been a pleasure speaking to you as always.